expert in the room finally, who's gonna be sharing with us about, Future Thinking 101. So currently Ariel is the director for Asia Pacific for Forum for the Future, which is a non-profit organization that looks into future thinking at least for Asia right now. So that's a very lousy introduction, and I must apologize, but I'm sure you have a couple of slides that will share with us a bit about what you do at Forums for the Future. So without further ado, Ariel Muller.
Thank you, everybody. It's so exciting to be here. I'm so jealous of the program that you're doing. I'm just like, gosh, I want to do that. Like have a couple of days like this. It's really incredible. So I think I want to start out. Actually, how do I move slides forward if I want to move slides? Have any of you done any type of futures thinking at all? Raise your hand if you have. Have you done anything? Okay, so there's a few people. Have any of you ever thought about the future? I think pretty much everybody's hand can be up, right? Okay, so you've all thought about the future, so you are kind of actually all futurist. You don't need to be an expert to do this. In fact, bringing people in that don't work in futures a lot is actually one of the ways that you get really good insights in terms of what's happening and how to do it well. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what futures is, why we're a sustainability organization, and so that's really my lens and what I care about in terms of what we create in the future. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Forum and what we do at Forum and how we use futures. And then tell you a little bit about what I think the traits are as you go into the next few days and you learn about all these different trends and you begin to think about the future. What kind of principles do you take with you as you begin to kind of immerse yourself into these future scenarios? So, really simple, if you were going to guess, if you were just going to say, what is futures thinking, what do you think it might be? Just throw something out. You're already futurist, right? No wrong answer. Say it again? Predictions? Okay, that sounds good, yeah. Anything else? What do we think about futures in terms of sustainability? And the way I think you as change agents probably will think about futures too, or think about futures thinking, is that it's not just thinking about what is, it's thinking about what can be and what will be, and what do you want to create, right? So then what I'm interested in is, why would we do futures thinking now? What would be really important to doing futures thinking now at this particular time? Thinking about all the different trends that we're facing, things like that. And what I'd like you to do is just take a few minutes at your tables and talk with one another. You can do it one-to-one and just think about what would be the value of futures thinking at this particular time. And it can be for you personally. It can be for what you want to do during these next few days. It could also be, why is it valuable to think about futures as a community, as a city, as the world? Why should we be thinking about the future? Okay? So I'm going to give you a few minutes, and I just want you to talk. Look, catch the eye of someone sitting next to you. That's your buddy. Have a conversation. I'm going to give you a few minutes, okay? Okay, that's been about 5 minutes. I hope I didn't cut any of you off in the middle of your last final genius thought about why I think about the futures. Can I hear some of the reasons that you came up with about why I think about the future? I'm going to give you the mic. Yeah.
So,
Can we get everybody's attention just for a minute?
So reason why we think about the future is because one reason is we can't move forward without thinking about the future, and also we need to have a sense of direction to have a uprising of new generation and combating issues that are arising. So, yeah.
Were there any other ideas from your table you wanted to capture? I heard one about thinking about children and your next generation, right? But that's very valid. I mean, we are thinking about the future because we're thinking about the next generation. And in the States, there's a story about one of the Native American tribes that every decision you make, you think about the next 7 generations. So it's not even the next generation, it's the next 7 generations. What about another table? Why should we think about the future? Hold on, I'm going to give you the mic.
Okay, why futures thinking? I think, okay, one thing is, if you're going to talk about problems, most relevant problems now, they tend to be complex. So there's a very long run up towards solving them. So futures thinking helps you navigate the space when you're solving a problem, because you can't make certain naive assumptions about what things are like now, because that will change as you move forward in time. So futures thinking helps with that. Then other thing is that it helps to grapple with the uncertainty inherent in futures. So futures thinking helps you address that issue to some extent. Yeah, okay.
You just gave my presentation, so I think I'm done now. That was very good. Anything? What about from this side of the room? Or any other tables?
What I think is that we need to think about future through like trends and etc. so that we know where we stand right now. Like we need to know if we're going in the right directions and if we have the correct goals. Yeah.
One more. Guys are making me run around a little bit.
I think futures thinking is especially important now because the world we're living in is getting very complex. Everything from like what we're going to do today or what we're going to eat or what we're going to read, there's so many choices to make. And I think in a world that's increasingly complex, if we don't have our own, in a sense, value system or groundedness, then after a while, I find that we may end up losing ourselves. Yeah, so and that's like on a personal basis. But as a community, can you imagine if I don't know what I want to do next time, so I'm trying everything. Then as a community, if having all the varied interests and personalities and backgrounds, if we don't know what we want to do together, then we will all get lost together. Yeah, so I think now is a very good and important time to think about it, and especially from maybe a values or principles kind of view, because like I think what my group mates mentioned, that really sets what kind of society or ecosystem we want to be in and live in the future. Yeah.
That's great. So you're all really are futures thinkers because you're thinking a lot about the complexity, and then you're thinking about, okay, what vision do we want to create in that complexity, and then how do we create a shared vision so that we're all working for it together. So really, you truly are very savvy already to a lot of the things that I'm actually trying to teach people inside businesses to get them to think in different ways. You're actually articulating it now. So you've got it. So in terms of some of those trends that you're mentioning, in terms of what we look at when we're just looking in the future, one of the largest trends in terms of uncertainty is, of course, climate change. And the thing about climate change is we actually can't predict what's going to happen. We know that it started happening, but it's not even that we can say, well, there's going to be drought necessarily in this area, there's going to be X numbers more storms. We really don't know. It's so complex at a systems level that the scientists are saying the most that we can say is it's incredibly uncertain. Some of the data that we do have, though, is that in this area in particular, there's a higher number of disasters. In fact, it's 45% of the events in the last 10 years, and in Southeast Asia, where there was the greatest increase in the number of events that actually, from climate change, impacting this region. Natural resource scarcity is another trend. We've got 9 billion people that are going to be on the planet soon, and we're consuming at a rate that I hear different things, but 3 to 4 to 7 different planets, and we're depleting all of our resources. So 60% of the world's one of those is water. 60% of the world's population lives in Southeast Asia. 36 of the water's resources are actually in this area. So there's a bit of a gap there. In addition to that, there's this idea of resource curses. So coltan, and I actually was reading about this last night in preparation for talking to you guys. Coltan is used in your cell phones, and we all have coltan in our mobile phones, and it's a rare mineral that's mostly mined in the Congo. And this connection between these minerals, these rare minerals, and the volatility of their prices impacts people that are actually working in those mines. So PlayStation 2 became extraordinarily popular. This was about 2009, so it's not very recent, but I'm sure that you guys are you're younger and savvier than I am, so you know what's particularly popular in terms of these types of games now. But PlayStation 2 grew exponentially, and then there was a high demand for coltan, and then it dropped, the price dropped, and a lot of people were unemployed, and there was increasing violence in the Congo because of that. So this relationship like you were saying, in terms of there's so many choices between what we consume and purchase every day, like I want to get the next iPhone, and the connection of that to people that are actually working in mines on the other side of the world. And we have sight into that now. We understand it better. And then we have choices as consumers. Another great trend, and at Forum we have a bank of about 138 trends like this. I'm not going to go through all of them with you. I've just picked a few, is overfishing. So 90% of the big fish have disappeared, and 90% of the corals are at risk. And again, that's within this region. So those are just a few, but as you guys have began to speak to, what really becomes complex is when you put all those things together. So you get climate change combined with the ability to hyperconnectivity, that we have greater transparency on where things are from, combined with resource scarcity, combined with air pollution, combined with demographic challenges, combined with migration, all these different things. It becomes a very complex environment. And this is what's really beginning to accelerate quite a bit. And when I do my work talking to different businesses and business leaders about change, ironically enough, this becomes one of the most powerful ways to talk about what I believe is happening. It's a very simple line. So change in the past, for the most part, has been happening at a fairly steady rate. But what we're getting to now, where you see the line getting jagged, is that change is starting to increase. It's the pace of change that's increasing and the complexity of all those different things coming together. So we're about here right now. And what tends to happen, and particularly in business, is that business leaders who are right here will say, you know, I'm very successful, I've done really well, and I'm going to keep doing what I've always done. But if you keep doing what you've always done for this future, you're not going to be prepared for this future, right? What ensured success in the past is not going to necessarily ensure success in the future. And then if you're someone that's committed to leading change, to being a change agent, to actually being one of the people that comes up with the solutions to some of these challenges, you need to be able to put yourself in that future and imagine what you need to do there and create from that place. So futures thinking is very much about what do we want to create based on what we know is ahead. And we want to put ourselves in that future space to think about it. So now I'm going to tell you a bit about Forum and how we do that. My organization primarily works with business. We have offices in New York, London, Mumbai, and Singapore. We're 5 people in Singapore right now. And I think we're going to get 2 more people within the next year. We started with 2 about a year and a half ago. So we're growing exponentially, even if we're only 6 people. And what we do is we work with companies to help prepare them for this type of future that we're describing. So we work in 2 ways. One is we'll work with an individual organization. We'll go in and we'll say, okay, how do we prepare you for the future? What is it that you do really well? What might be opportunities and risk? And we'll use futures to do that for your particular company. And inevitably, what we found out was that once you got rid of the low-hanging fruit for a company, as you said, okay, they reduced their water footprint, they're investing in renewable energy, but there's a lot more they can do. And to really solve those problems, you needed to begin to work up and down the supply chain and really get into those much more complex issues. So our work led us into doing more cross-sector collaborations, where we're working across the whole supply chain and with a whole system and not just working with one particular company. Sort of an example of that is when you think about if one company, if you say, well, what's your climate mitigation risk? How are you reducing your risk to climate? And one of the in a strange way, one of the first responses will be, well, we're reducing our carbon footprint. We're reducing the amount of carbon we emit. But does reducing your carbon footprint actually mitigate your risk to climate change? It actually just sort of, it's just reducing your footprint and your particular impact. In order to really reduce your risk to climate change, you're going to have to do cross-sector collaboration. You're going to have to work much larger than that. You're going to have to begin to work with policies, with lobby for policy change, lobby for climate change. And in the States, there were a group of companies that began to do that realized no matter how much they reduced their carbon footprint and got more efficient, they weren't reducing their risk to climate change because the risk to climate change were so great. And they began to actually lobby the US government for more progressive climate change policy that would actually tax them. Like they would make less in the short run, but they would mitigate the real risk of climate change in the long run. And that kind of mind shift, that kind of like, wow, I'm approaching this problem in an entirely new way, is one of the ways that futures thinking can really catalyze a step change when you're working with companies. So we have about 140 companies that we work with around the world. We've got a few of the local ones highlighted in color. Sime Darby in Malaysia. Eat Me Chutney is actually in Australia, and it's a family company with 3 people, 2 parents and a son. So we have all ranges and sizes. And so what we do is we track what's emerging on the horizon and track these trends and where we're seeing solutions emerge to these types of challenges, and then we use those within our futures processes. So for example, in response to the climate change, we're tracking right now where are we seeing divestment. For example, Boris Johnson is the mayor of London being asked to divest the pension funds, $4.8 billion, from fossil fuels over the next 3 years. And if we begin to see the divestment of cities divesting and companies divesting and universities divesting from these types of funds, that signals a type of tipping change in terms of where we need to go to be more environmentally responsible. So I just wanted to pull up a few positive things because I started with negativity in terms of here's all the bad things that are happening, right? And I know that you are like people who are innovative and solution driven. So I didn't want to come up and give this presentation without saying, okay, here's some solutions. So in response to food security or fishing, that there's actually a tomato-based sushi that's part of the faux fish trend. Interface, and this is actually happening in the Philippines, is a carpet company. And they're making carpet out of old fishing nets. Has anybody heard of this company? So they're an American company, but they do some manufacturing here. And the fishing nets, it used to be that fishing nets were made out of rope, and when you wanted to repair it, you tied it back together. But now they tend to be made out of nylon, a type of nylon. It's actually much harder to repair. So rather than repairing it, fishermen will tend to just throw it out back into the ocean. Then it gets caught up in the coral reefs and starts to damage the coral reefs. So what Interface did is said, okay, they want to figure out how to create a closed loop where waste becomes the input of their into their carpet. So they set up a social enterprise that collected nets, incentivized fishermen or anyone within those communities to gather the nets, turn them in for money. They'd essentially get paid, and that became an input, a type of actually supply chain, you know, and actually a pretty short supply chain in the terms of you think about how complex the things are that go into a carpet, into their carpet material, and then they're turning around and making tiles out of it and selling it. And they've got 6 pilots going right now, and they're looking to scale it even further. And I was speaking to people that are doing it. I was like, well, what if you run out of net? And he was like, we won't run out of net for a long time. There's a lot out there. So those kind of innovative solutions. This is a fun one, and we just put up a platform that shares our future trends and our signals of change. And this one got shared we were really excited because it got shared 450 times or something, which is the most we've had anything shared. And it's attaching wireless routers to sheep in the countryside so that you can get wireless connectivity to people that are in rural places. So sheep as routers. I can tell you guys like that one too. See, it's very popular. So now I just want to give you one example of how we work with business. So we have a lot of different projects. We've done future of dairy. I'm looking at something around the future of food security, future of land use. We take these big issues, these big problems, and then we say, okay, what is the future of that? And who do we need to get involved in terms of solving that future? So one of the things that we're working on right now is the future of tea. And tea is a commodity. It has a very thin margin. Its price is very volatile. The farmers that actually make it don't have much protection from that price, so they can be in debt quite quickly and have a lot of exposure and risk. It's also grown in really climate-sensitive areas in terms of sort of on those kind of that within mountainous regions, that's actually where you see the temperatures moving quickly up and down. Like wine is also another crop that's quite exposed to climate risk, and it's changing quite a bit. So tea is also exposed to this climate change risk. And so the question was, how can tea companies and farmers and everyone that's involved with that system get together and create a vision, create a shared vision based on this complexity of the future of how how can we solve some of these problems by working together? Because none of them, one of the companies is Finley's, and they were the first, Finley's was our anchor tenant. It was like, we really want to invest in this, but they couldn't do it on their own, right? They couldn't do it by themselves. They actually needed the whole system there, and they needed the farmers there, they needed the markets there. So these are the companies that are involved in the partnership, and it's going on right now. This is actually something that's happening right now. We started it about a year and a half ago, and it'll probably go for another two to 3 years, because these types of problems take some time to solve. So we've got some brands you might recognize in terms of Unilever, Fenley's, and then we have NGOs like Rainforest Alliance and Ethical Tea Partnership. So those are in addition to that, there's about 15, 20 other members, but these are the ones that actually paid to participate and are really committed to whatever the solution is coming out. They had other people participate just to sort of give their input. So certifiers, producers, packers, and they created a vision for what would the future of tea be. And the process we went through is, first we did a lot of research, and we collected a lot of trends, like the ones that I shared with you, but they were very specific to tea. We did a lot of interviews, and we interviewed inside the companies in terms of what people are seeing at every level of the system to find out what people were seeing. We gathered that all together. We brought everybody that was part of this challenge, and we put them in a room, and we immersed them in that future. Said, okay, let's look at these trends. What's it like to be, like a workshop much like this, and let them see what it was like to be in that future. So then we had them prioritize. Okay, I think we started probably with about 138 trends, and then they prioritized what trends do you think will be the most important to your particular business, in your point of view. From that, we created 4 scenarios. And essentially, the scenarios are built on what might be possible, what's probable, what will most likely happen, what's possible, what could happen, and then I usually have one that's like, it might not happen, but let's go ahead and put it in there. That's a higher uncertain. They're sort of based on different levels of certainty. And then within those scenarios, they began to think about, okay, what are the risks and opportunities, and what type of solutions should we come up with? What kind of innovations can we do? And then they tested those innovations against each scenario, and that meant that the scenario was actually the solution was actually future-proof. They'd created a future-proof solution because it would fit across all those different scenarios. So these were the scenarios, and what we tend to do is we use the power of story quite a bit to be able to sort of immerse people within a potential future. So we've got, I'm not going to read through each one, I'll give you a moment to read them. We've got chai time, storm in a teacup, Rebrowed, and green leaf. And the people that participated within these workshops were the ones that actually named these and sort of based these on these different trends. And when you think about that line where I said, change hasn't happened very quickly, and then now it's beginning to happen quite quickly. One way is, and there's a lot of uncertainty. One way scenarios help you prepare for uncertainty is you say, okay, a number of things could happen. Let's say 4 different things could happen, and you test your idea against each one of those ideas, each one of those scenarios, and you're like, okay, it worked in each one. So it's future fit. It's ready to go. And we'll do that with business strategies and innovative solutions. So essentially, the solutions that they came up with and committed to were new approaches to land management. We tend to approach sustainable agriculture as certifying a supply chain. So for example, sustainable tea, like it's been certified, it's fair trade, things like that. The new approach is actually a landscape approach where you go into that community and you sort of draw a line around that particular ecosystem. And you say, given within that ecosystem and the people that live there and the resources are there, what does sustainability look like? Because if you have 6 certified agricultural companies using the same land, the land will still get depleted, right? So it's called a landscape approach, where you're actually sort of situating yourself into the land and defining it from that point of view, rather sort of than back in the headquarters of some company that's actually said, okay, it's organic, but we didn't take into account the ecosystem. Sorry, a little bit of environmental geekery there. New market mechanisms to protect the farmers, to help them better understand price. And then engaging consumers in a new story about tea, how it can be, making it a hero crop. So that's one of the ways we use futures, and then the companies go on to begin to invest in that. And then what we really believe is that these large companies can help create that. If you can shift some of these big companies in the way that they do what they do, that we can create large system change. That's not the only way to create change. There are also disruptors and innovators, and I think that's probably who we have here in this room, is people that are going to come up with the new models and the better solutions. So I work with incumbents. It's the old system. It's not as much fun. You're going to have much more fun, I promise. You're going to come up with the new models that actually represent, that are socially just and environmentally friendly. So now I want to share with you a little bit of what I think makes a good futures thinker. But again, I'm going to ask you first to take a little bit of time. So this is a bit different in terms of why think futures. This is, what do you think it makes someone good at imagining the future? Like what would make them, what would be the skills of someone? You mentioned, I think it was you that mentioned value-based, like knowing your values and knowing principles. So maybe one of those is being principled, having principles about how you approach the future. So I'm just going to give you, and I'm sorry, I do have a caveat here. So I have on the side, who wants to be a change agent? So there are futures thinkers that are not particularly interested in being change agents. They're just obsessed about the future. You guys are people who are interested in creating positive solutions. So what are the traits of a futures thinker that's interested in creating positive solutions in the future? And I'll give you about 5 minutes again. Okay. All right, so who would like to share? We have a little bit of time, so I think we can let a few more people share this time than we did last time. What are the skills? What makes a good futures thinker, change agent? Somebody raised their hand. Hello. You were all talking, so I know you have ideas. Here? Okay.
All right, okay. All right. We have a few points, 6 actually. So the first one is a good futures thinker is able to manage to improve a community in the next 5 years, the minimum amount. And is also an individual who is steadfast, yet not skeptical of whatever they are doing. And someone who can fluctuate between both ends of the spectrum of being realistic and idealistic. Yeah. To also understand that whatever they do, whatever their work is, that there should be no egotistical pursuit, and to lay the foundation for the future generation. So basically to be selfless and also to be trendsetters.
Great. Really wonderful. Another table?
Hello. Okay, I'm Desmond. Nice to meet everyone. So one of the points that my group raised, I think is quite an innovative answer, is that a good future thinker should be daring as well. Because like just now what Muhammad has raised, good future thinker may have all the traits that that's needed, such as being able to anticipate the future and stuff like that. But he also must be daring, I feel. Such that change can be actually implemented, and it actually answers the question that that mini question that you posed. Yeah. So thank you.
That's great. Thank you. I think these are so good. I'm going to do every table, so you might as well get in the queue. Who would like to be next? Okay. We're doing every table because these are so good. I hope somebody, are they getting caught somewhere? Is somebody writing them all down? Because I'll tell you, I asked my team, and when I say my team, I mean folks in London as well as folks here and folks in the US. And you're coming up with things they haven't come up with, and things you're coming up with are pretty great. So I want to take them back to my people.
Hey guys, I think what makes a really good future thinker is someone who's really flexible in their thinking. And that shows your ability to be practical and also balance out practicality as well as idealism. So you can actually be very open-minded, and essentially nothing begins with optimism. So everything has to have a jump starter, and that is optimism, to have the flexibility to see from a 360 view, and so that you can just go forward. With the energy and gusto, I think that makes you really a good future thinker.
About this table.
Okay. Hi everyone. What are good things as a whole is that before we can think about the future, we need to know what's happening right now. So we need to have good knowledge of what current affairs are, and when we think for the future, things may get. When we want to make changes for the future, things may get difficult at the start. So you need a certain level of perseverance and commitment, and you got to be optimistic as well. And when you get started with doing changes, you must be prepared to get your hands dirty. And I think what Mr. Gandhi has said before, you must be the change you want to see in the world. Yeah, thank you.
Great. I'll add that in terms of expertise, because I have to work with a lot of different industries, and sort of within a week I'll go from shipping to aviation to agriculture, and I don't have that expertise in terms of what the current aspect is. So one of the ways you do that is that you bring that person into your team, and you build that type of network with that type of knowledge, so that there's you do need that knowledge on the team, but you individually don't necessarily always have to have it. Okay. Oh, did I do this table? You did it. Sorry. This table. I saw you talking. One moment, please.
Okay. So, believe in thinking about the future, we still have to be rooted in the present. So we have to be in touch with the present and try to make changes in the present before we start dreaming about the future. And also, not make too many assumptions. So for anything that is happening right now, I think the best assumption to take would be to assume that it could happen in 500 other ways. So not make any big assumptions.
Great, thank you. So one of the ways that in sort of complexity theory, which people go and get their PhDs in complexity theory, which is about that idea that many different things can happen and you don't really know what's going to happen. So how do you prepare for that? How do you design the strategy for a business within that or a solution with that? And that's to be principle-based. So what you do agree to is no matter what the environment, these will be our principles. And if you can create that shared understanding of your principles, then you can kind of step into that uncertainty and be really agile and changing all the time based on what's happening externally. Did we hear from this table? I don't think so. Yes, we did. We heard from you about daring. This table. Okay, we'll give you a minute.
Hello, everybody. I think the first speaker has covered quite a lot of angles. I just want to add on to maybe being optimistic is good, but not forgetting to be realistic. And being a futurist means also to take into consideration all the different opinions, because being one-sided, you could be right, but there could be someone else who is also right.
Very good.
Hi everyone again. So most of you have made all the points that I've already written here. So I think for our group, we think is being able to see future possible trends or problems that might appear from a current situation that might look like it doesn't have a problem. So for example, when CPF first started, I'm quite sure that whoever first, so I'm sorry, I did not sleep last night, okay, so CPF is the last thing on my mind. So when Central Provident Fund first started, obviously whoever started the CPF did not think of any problems. They thought about it as a retirement plan, and it's a good plan. So if we were to leave when 30 years ago, we would have probably thought it was a good plan. It's good to pay for your houses, and it's good to pay to start as a retirement savings and so on. What they didn't foresee though was the possible future problems for generation like ours. So to be a good future thinker, we shouldn't only think about the current generation and the problems that the current generations are facing, it's the problems that the future generation might be facing. So possible problems that might appear from current good solutions. Solutions that are currently sounds good to us. Okay, for example, I'm 29 this year. Oh no, I'm 28, 29 tomorrow. Then after that, to me, at this point of time, right, I might think about what I want for my future, what is good for me. I want a cheaper HDB flat, I want CPF to be more flexible and so on. But what is actually good for my children? What is actually good for my children? So it's something that, and not for my children, maybe for my children's children. And like she mentioned, 7 generations from now. Yep.
Thank you. Okay, you ready?
Hello guys. I think our team discussed that maybe because most of you guys talk about optimistic, but in the contrary, I think we think that being a pessimistic is as well can be a good future thinker. I mean a good skill because I guess you will think of the worst case scenario, and by you thinking of all the worst case scenario, actually you are coming up with solution or trying to think of solution to tackle this worst case scenario that going to happen.
I want to add that, like, to be a good future thinker, like, instead of just finding faults in everything, like, we need to, like, how to say, have deeper thought, like, look into it much at a deeper perspective, and find solutions and take actions instead of just leaving it at, like, it's hopeless and stuff. Yeah. Do you want to add?
Also, sometimes, right, instead when we see structures with existing like faults and errors, we should not like completely go and dismiss everything about it. Instead, we should look at the structures, find the effective elements within it, and then look at a wide range of sources of other existing structures and combine the elements from them to create something new and innovative. Otherwise, like come up with our own elements so that we can find new solutions to meet new challenges. And also, finally, I feel that we also must be conscious of contingency. Basically, the grand assumption of all solutions is that the future will be something like the past, and I feel that we should be wary of it.
Great. Thank you. Yes, I mean, before you ask me something, is there anyone else that wants to contribute any their ideas? Because this table actually had a bunch of ideas. Okay.
Maybe the ability to think in a multidisciplinary manner. I think a lot of us are entrenched in our own disciplines, and obviously it's important to have a multidisciplinary team, but as individuals, we should also be open to thinking in different ways. So for example, not just thinking like a scientist, a technocrat, but also thinking as a designer and stuff like, at least being open to these possibilities.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I was just going to bring up that there are many ways to do something. So I think future thinkers, they have to keep evaluating. If they do something a certain way and people may say it's a failure, but then if you don't know 10 years down the road how this plan will turn out. So I think you got to keep collecting data and keep assessing whether or not this mechanism is working, whether or not we should go a different route. So no one way to do something.
I wanted to bring up the thing about personal pain, because it's like personal pain. That means I think people who because futures thinking, I think there needs to be a very big vision involved. So for example, if let's say I've suffered from cancer, then I'll go out for cancer patients. Or if my brother died in a cycling accident, then I will pay a lot of attention to that. So like. So what I'm trying to say is that when shit happens to you, it's actually good because it gives me the motivation to go all out for something, and the earlier it happens, the better. Yeah. So I only started thinking about all these like holistic education big issues when I was struggling with what I wanted to do in life. Yeah. So that's why I think sometimes personal pain is a very powerful driving force, and it's not a bad thing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. So over here we have a very interesting characteristics like the idea of being reflective and like, retrospective, looking back at the history and looking back at our own past so that we can move forward. And this is linked to another idea which was brought by another member, is the ability to recognize patterns and join the dots kind of backwards and somehow sense how the dots can move forward. The other one which was, I thought something that we sometimes forget is that need for imagination. So a future thinker need to imagine. I think be more like kids, be more childlike, and have that guts to imagine. I think it's a very important thing. And I think last but not least, futures to be an alone futures person it's not the ideal. It's always good to work with the community and someone who's gracious and open-hearted to engage with the community and draw out the aspirations. So that.
Okay, it's good. All right, I'm going to share mine. Some of mine overlap, and then I just want to say a few things in response to what you just said. And in terms of the conversation around optimism, I think you do need optimism. But if you're solving problems, there's usually a shadow side to these problems. There's usually something a little bit dark. And so you also have to be good at creating a space where people can talk about dark things and creating a safe space to do that and not be afraid of the dark and not being afraid to have those hard conversations. Because if you're really going to get into solving problems, you're going to have to expose some things that aren't very beautiful. So being able to do that. And I talk a lot about it as that futures are a way to architect a conversation that you want to have by looking at the future and creating that shared vision. So I often call it conversation architecture in terms of futures. So I think that's it. I have more notes because your ideas were so great, but I'm just going to do those two for those two feedback for the moment. I lost my presentation. Did I do it? There we go. Okay. So these were some of the things that I had and that we heard from the team, is be a visionary, long-term thinker. So it's that you're looking out 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, and you want to be operating in that landscape. And human nature is you'll come back to 3 and 5 years. But you want to be thinking out long-term, and then have the imagination. And here's the kid, so to your point about having that kind of childlike visionary vision. Don't forget the past. There are things from the past that sometimes we want to carry forward. I know you guys did timelines last night in terms of the good, the bad, and the ugly, and there is good. And there is who we are, and there is our purpose and our identity, and there are those things that we want to carry forward. And I think it's important to remember those things. And the photo I have is from the dragon kiln. And I think that's a great example of when we think about what's the future that we want to create, that sometimes that's saying, what do we want to carry forward from the past into that future? And also that it's not always, I think I have this on another one, it's not always technology. You know, when we think about the future, it's also some of the things that are our culture that we take forward. Be incessantly curious. This is a picture of dinosaurs and a moth. And one of the women that works for me in her first interview, she walked in and she said, I'm passionate about dinosaurs, and why do we have so many moths right now? And I was like, and this was last year, and I was like, this person's going to be great. She's incessantly curious. She wants to know why these things are happening. She has an amazing imagination for them. So you want to see the connections between things that other people don't necessarily see, and don't be afraid to ask questions. Make uncertainty a ritual. So be really comfortable with what's not comfortable. And then your capacity to do that is what enables other people to do that as well. Trust the process, because there's going to be times when it's going to get messy, and you're going to think, oh my gosh, this isn't working at all. We're never going to come to a conclusion. And somehow you do. I don't know how, but it does, so trust the process. Rely on diversity. So lots of you talked about thinking about the future, but actually not thinking about the different generation. Or there was another one around bringing expertise. So we can't do this alone. The future is networked. The future is all of us. And so you want to, as much as possible, bring in other voices. Always be people-centered. And this is a little bit with what we were talking about with empathy and trust. And again, I think there is a tendency to, when we talk about futures, to be technologically focused in terms of the solutions. We want our solutions to be about people. And technology is a way to service that, but mainly we're about what are we providing for people. Then this is my final quote, and it's from Ursula Le Guin, who's a sci-fi writer. I don't know if any of you read her work. And she just won a award for, not a Pulitzer Prize, but won an award for her writing. She says, "We will be wanting the voices of those who can see alternatives to how we live now and can see through our fear-stricken society and its obsessive technologies to other ways of being. We will need writers who can remember freedom, poets, visionaries, to be the realist of the larger reality." Now, she's speaking to writers, but I actually feel that you are, in a sense, writing a new type of story as change agents. So I think you have the same opportunity and the same ability to do this. So thank you very much, and I hope you have a great day.